On October 29, 2018, at 6:20 in the morning, a Boeing 737 MAX took off from Jakarta carrying 189 people. 30 minutes later, every one of them was dead. The plane was 3 months old, the crew was rated, the weather was clear. What killed them was a piece of software the pilots had never been told about, reading from a single sensor, doing exactly what its engineers had written it to do. This is the story of how a company that had built airplanes for 100 years let a line of code push 2 of its own jets into the ground. The Boeing 737 first flew in 1967. It was small, it sat low to the ground, it had short landing gear, it was designed in an era when jet engines were the size of a man. For 50 years, Boeing sold it, more than 10,000 of them, the most successful commercial aircraft in history. But by 2010, the world had changed. Airbus had launched a new version of its A320 with bigger, more efficient engines. Fuel prices were rising. Airlines were calculating cost per seat mile to 4 decimal places. They wanted what Airbus was offering. Boeing had a choice. They could design a clean-sheet new airplane, or they could find a way to put bigger engines on the old 737. Designing a new plane would take 10 years and $15 billion. Modifying the 737 would take 3 years and a fraction of that. Boeing chose to modify. The problem was geometry. The new engines were larger in diameter. The old 737 sat too low to the ground to fit them underneath the wing in the original position. Boeing's engineers moved the engines forward and up, mounted them higher on the wing, forward of the leading edge. This solved the clearance problem, it created a different one. In certain flight conditions, particularly at low speed with the nose pitched high, the new engine position generated extra lift in the wrong place. The plane's nose wanted to pitch up further, on its own. To a pilot, this felt unfamiliar. It also broke the FAA's rule that the new MAX had to fly enough like the old 737 that pilots wouldn't need expensive simulator retraining. Boeing had promised the airlines they wouldn't. So Boeing did what software companies do, they wrote a patch. They called it MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. MCAS sat quietly inside the flight computer. It watched one sensor on the outside of the airplane, a small vane mounted on the fuselage near the cockpit, the angle of attack sensor. If the sensor said the nose was pitching up too high, MCAS would silently push the horizontal stabilizer at the back of the plane downward, trimming the nose back down, without telling the pilot. The pilot would feel the controls move, they would not know why. In the differences training Boeing provided to airlines, MCAS was not mentioned. In the pilot operating manual, the acronym appeared exactly once, in the glossary at the back, without explanation. And the system, the one that could push a fully loaded passenger jet into a dive, was reading from one sensor, with no cross-check against the second sensor on the other side of the plane, a single point of failure. A Boeing engineer named Curtis Eubank had proposed in 2014 to add a synthetic airspeed system that would cross-check the angle of attack readings. His proposal was rejected. The cited reason was cost. By 2017, internal Boeing chat messages would say things like, "This airplane is designed by clowns who in turn are supervised by monkeys." The MAX was already in the skies. Lion Air Flight 610 took off from Sukarno-Hatta International Airport on October 29, 2018. The angle of attack sensor on the captain's side, the left side, had been replaced 2 days earlier. It had been installed incorrectly. It was reading 21 degrees too high. From the moment the plane lifted off the runway, the sensor told the flight computer the nose was pitching dangerously up. MCAS activated. The horizontal stabilizer began trimming nose down. The captain, hand on the yoke, felt the controls fighting him. He pulled back. The plane briefly leveled, then MCAS engaged again. 5 seconds, then another 5. Over the next 11 minutes, MCAS commanded the trim downward 26 times. The captain and first officer never knew what they were fighting. They went through their checklists. They tried different responses. They called for help. The stick shaker warned the entire flight. Their altitudes oscillated up and down as they fought to recover, then lost ground each time. The flight data recorder captured the captain saying Allahu Akbar 13 seconds before impact. The plane hit the Java Sea at 575 miles per hour. There were no survivors. Boeing's first response was that the crew had failed to follow procedure. The runaway stabilizer trim checklist had existed for years. The pilots, they said, should have known to disengage the electric trim. Lion Air, they suggested, had a poor safety culture. The FAA did not ground the airplane. Other aviation regulators looked to the FAA. The 737 MAX continued to fly, 387 of them with 2 billion passengers a year scheduled to pass through their cabins. Boeing's engineers were working on a software patch. It would add cross-checking. It would limit the number of times MCAS could activate. It was not yet released. For 5 months, the airplane kept flying with the same configuration that had killed the people on Lion Air 610. On March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 took off from Addis Ababa, bound for Nairobi. The angle of attack sensor on the captain's side failed in flight almost immediately, possibly a bird strike. The data is not entirely clear. The pilots this time knew what MCAS was. After Lion Air Boeing had issued a bulletin, they had read it. They recognized what was happening. They followed the procedure exactly. They turned off the electric trim. They tried to use the manual trim wheel between the pilot seats to correct the stabilizer position by hand. The wheel would not move. At the speed the plane was flying, with the stabilizer at its maximum nose-down position, the aerodynamic load on the manual trim wheel was too high for human strength to overcome. The pilots could not turn it. They could not reach the runway. They could not arrest the dive. 6 minutes after takeoff, the plane hit a field near Hedger at over 600 miles per hour. 157 people died, from 35 countries. This time, the world did not wait for the FAA. China grounded the MAX within 24 hours. The European Union followed, Indonesia, India, Singapore. By the third day, the FAA stood alone. On March 13th, it grounded the airplane as well. For 20 months, 737 MAX jets sat on the ground, stored in deserts and at parking lots beside runways, nose to tail in long lines in the heat. The investigations that followed found what the engineers inside Boeing had already known: a single sensor without cross-check, a hidden system without proper documentation, a training regime that had assured airlines pilots could fly the MAX the same as the old 737, a regulatory framework where Boeing had been delegated under FAA oversight to certify the safety of its own design. The House Transportation Committee's final report used the word horrific and the word betrayal in the same sentence. Boeing settled with the Department of Justice for $2.5 billion. 2 former executives were criminally charged. Most of the cases against individuals were eventually dismissed. The maximum penalty for any individual remained unclear. The Thurak 25 killed 6 people in the 1980s because engineers removed a $5 hardware safety fuse and trusted the software in its place. The 737 MAX killed 346 people because engineers built a hidden single-source software override and trusted that pilots would somehow figure it out. The technology had changed, the pattern had not. When software is given authority over a physical system that can kill people, the question that matters is no longer how well the software works on average. It is what happens when the input the software trusts turns out to be wrong. In 1986, the answer was Ray Cox, dying of radiation burns in a Texas hospital because a single line of code processed his treatment in a way the operator was assured was impossible. In 2018 and 2019, the answer was 346 people in the Java Sea in a field in Ethiopia, fighting controls that did not tell them what they were fighting, because a single sensor had been installed wrong on one flight and damaged on another, and no one had built the airplane to ask a second question. It is not enough to verify the code. It is necessary also to ask whether the world inside the code matches the world outside it. Watch the full history unfolded archive for more.
If this felt like history, subscribe. More stories, more weight.